please to order. It's my gavel. I'm David Albritton, your committee chair representing the city of Clearwater, and we'll go around the room introducing everybody, starting on my left.
Good morning, I'm Patty Reed, City of Pinellas Park.
Morning, Tom Reed, City of South Pasadena.
No relation.
No. You spell it wrong.
My goodness. Deborah Fig Sanders, City of St. Petersburg.
Vince Cox, Pinellas County.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brad Miller. I'm the CEO of PSDA.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and have public comment. Is there any public comment? Nobody? Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes for the May 15th meeting?
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, so Debbie, I think, are you up with the presentation on the fiscal year 25 budget?
Let me introduce Debbie.
Okay.
So, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, Debbie and the team is about to give you a presentation of, you're the first people to see this presentation of the fiscal year 2025 PSDA budget, which is in your packet in all its glory at 163 pages, I see. I think Debbie will introduce her great team and then I'll put this together. We've been working hard on this. Obviously, this is the beginning of a process that will take us all the way to September with the final approval, and there'll be some key decisions along the way for you to make. What I would just like to ask at this point, you're going to hear sort of the summary today, but what I'd like to do is have Rachel work with each of you, with the whole PSA board, to try to get a one-on-one with each of you in person, with me and Debbie, to go over the budget at sometime between now and September. That we try to get on your calendars to do that. So feel free to ask any questions today, but if you think of something else, hopefully we'll have another time where we can dive into it more deeply. With that, I pass on to Debbie.
Thank you, Brad. Today we are going to be reviewing the fiscal 25 operating budget. I do want to thank not only the team, but everybody who had input into this. We've got Kevin Lai here. Tricia is on her way somewhere. Lewis is our new financial planning and analysis manager. She came here probably about a month ago and had to dive right into the middle of all this. So I'm really appreciative of everything we're doing. Speaking of being appreciative, I am very appreciative of the input and the ideas that the board brought through the workshops, through the budget development process. Out of that, staff took away some key items that we wanted to look at as we put the budget together. That was increasing ridership, really taking a good look at what we could do with revenues, introducing some tourist services, as well as partnerships and growing our partnerships. We had a lot of discussion about that in our workshop, and of course, cost efficiencies. And while we're one of the most cost-efficient transit authorities in the country, we continue to find ways to improve that. Speaking of the workshop, for those who attended the workshop, we spent time with Trish Collins, our HR director, collaborating with her on our organizational scorecard metrics. So what we took away from some of that is to be able to take a look at modifying or adding new metrics like you see on the chart up here that reflect the important ideas that you brought forth to us and then we've embedded into the budget process. Next month, you will be asked to review and approve the scorecard metrics for fiscal 25. Now, one of the things I want to say is here at PSTA, even though we are a government entity, we use the balanced scorecard method to measure our performance through metrics. So this is extremely important in a very business-like manner. Now let's take a look at the slide. But before we actually do that, as Brad mentioned in your packets, is the initial draft of the 25 budget. You don't need to read all 163 pages unless you want to, and that's why Brad and I are here, and it's one of our own scorecard metrics we just made up that we do want to meet with all of you, because for anyone who knows me, I love talking numbers, I love the story that they tell, so I'm looking forward to meeting with all of you. So let's take a look. I brought my cat toy with me here. Let's take a look at the slide here. And on this slide is a summary, and you also have a one-page summary on the budget. But let's take a look. And the second column here is fiscal '24. That is the fiscal year we're in right now. It will be ending in September. What we're forecasting right now is that we will have revenues of $113 million, and that we will have expenses of $112 million, leaving us with the surplus at the end of this year. As I mentioned, I'm very proud of what the staff has done. We pushed from the budget side, asked a lot of questions. I'm sure I annoyed a few people during the process this year, but that's okay, because it came out really well. Everyone has been so focused on how to increase revenues or decrease expenses. So let's take a look at the last column over here, which is the column that we're working on right now, our fiscal '25 budget. Let's take a look at the revenues. Next year's revenues, $122.3 million. Let's ignore the next line for the second. Let's just drop down to the bottom line, $121.7 million of expenses. So revenues, 122.3, expenses, 121.7. Revenues are greater than expenses, so we have next year a balanced budget. No route cuts, some new initiatives you'll be hearing about. But what I want to talk about next is staff has some recommendations on a fare adjustment to our fixed route service that will only improve the bottom line. And with the $1.1 million surplus at the bottom, assuming we get that approved, we will be able to do some additional initiatives that have been brought up by board members, such as having service from Clearwater Airport out to the beaches. So let's talk a little bit about the fare adjustments. A couple months ago, we came to the planning committee and Brad did a presentation and out of the workshop talking about different ideas that we had, some of which were, let's raise the base fare from $2.25 to something like $2.50, lowering the base fare to $2, looking at our fare caps, and staff did an analysis of this. When we look at raising fares, as we know, you lose ridership. We don't want to lose ridership. That's one of the key things we want to continue to increase. When we looked at lowering the fares, our analysis suggested that any of the money we would lose, we wouldn't make up with additional ridership. So we took those two off the table, and staff concentrated on raising the monthly fare cap from $70 to $80. Now let me explain a little bit what that is. $85, and it's consistent with our regional fare. So now we would have a regional fare to be able to go into Hillsborough County, Pasco County. It would work all through the region. Today, just to give an example, our daily fare cap is $5. When you get on the bus and you tap your Flamingo card or your phone, $2.25. Next ride, tap, another $2.25, you're at $4.50. Third tap, another 50 cents, and you're capped at $5 for the day. The rest of the day, you ride for free. And this continues through the month to the point where you're up to $70, which is about halfway through the month. And after that, it's free. So with us recommending going to $85, for those people who actually get to the $70, it will be free after about 7 more trips. I would say over 50% of our riders are actually in different programs where they're either riding for free with the Veterans Program, riding for free with where we're getting money through the UPass program, or they're part of our Transportation Disadvantaged group. With Transportation Disadvantaged, the rider pays $11 to ride all month. The state picks up the other currently $59 to get us to $70. With this recommendation, the state will still pick up the balance of it. The riders, nothing changes, they're still paying $11 a month. That has a significant revenue impact for us of well over $400,000, while the impact to our riders who do cap now is very minimal. So this recommendation would give us about over $500,000 of additional revenue to improve the bottom line. So what I would do now is I'm going to pass it over to Darden to talk to us about some new initiatives.
Great. Thank you, Debbie. Hi, everyone. Hello, Chair Albritton and members of the Planning Committee. I'm Darden Rice, Chief Planning and Community Affairs Officer, and I'm presenting you some of our top-line concepts for our proposed fiscal year 2025 services. As you know, PSTA is honored and grateful to be recognized as APTA's #1 mid-sized transit agency of the year last year. And the planning team works closely with you, other agencies, and responds to community stakeholders as we work together and think about ways to improve our service. So all of PSTA certainly wants us to keep up our important level of service, to push ourselves to get even better results for riders and taxpayers alike as we plan for fiscal year 25. So #1, to keep up our commitment to our riders and taxpayers, we propose no service reductions. Last year, our board voted to enact service reductions for routes 813, 814, the Central Avenue Trolley, west of Grand Central. That was a vote that was taken in October. It was enacted in December. This year, we don't want to cut routes, but we do want to set the stage for considering strategic expansions. As you all know, and we talked about this at our board workshop, we live in a county where 48% of our population is either below the federal poverty level, or they are people who are working paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make ends meet. These are people who depend on PSTA service, and employers depend on PSTA to get people to the workplace. So we want to focus on making our existing service better. You all also know that transit is an investment, and it's a fundamental investment in economic development for our area. So we present to you some of the following ways that we want to build on our current service, and this is based on feedback from both the board and the public as well. So new 34th Street South premium service. We are utilizing service development grants and earmarks to provide higher frequency along the 34th Street South corridor. This is from Eckerd College to Grand Central Station. This will connect to and complement the Bus Rapid Transit Sunrunner service. Next is waterborne transit service, our Clearwater Beach Ferry and the Cross Bay Ferry service. An RFP is out for our continued waterborne transit ferry services for the Clearwater Beach area. We are also planning for PSTA to issue an RFP in the coming months for the Cross Bay Ferry. These are successful, popular, well-known services, and they are the foundation for the waterborne transit studies that you've read about in the news lately, in which Forward Pinellas and others are evaluating potential expansion. Next is the St. Pete Clearwater Airport service to the beaches. We have heard loud and clear from you all at many public meetings the desire to provide new service between Clearwater Beach and the St. Pete Clearwater Airport, also known as PIE. So our planning team is looking very closely, working with stakeholders to determine what that service looks like, what the ridership will be, what are the operating costs, the capital costs, and importantly, the potential sources of revenue to pay for it. And lastly, we have the community bus plan. We have currently wrapped up our second phase of public outreach, and we will be commencing the third phase once we get back from you board recommendations on the budget. We're doing a deep dive into our current services and looking for opportunities for improvement. The community bus plan, as you know, is something that we do every 10 years. It goes into the TDP, the Transit Development Plan, which goes into the LRTP, the Long Range Transit Plan, which is aligned with the long-term planning work that Forward Pinellas does. The changes that we present from that plan will be in a cost-neutral framework. Also, as part of the community bus plan process, we're going to provide the board with analysis of what improved premium service would look like along some of our core corridors. So expect that in the fall. Wrapping this up, we are looking at the big ideas, such as the service from Clearwater, the St. Pete Clearwater Airport to the beaches, as I mentioned before. We're also evaluating what the future looks like in terms of possible multimodal stations that would align with the new gateway area improvements and the Pinellas County headquarters to be built at Ulmerton. We're looking at potential multimodal stations with the emerging plans with a historic gas plant redevelopment. Obviously, these are things where there is a lot in play, but the planning department we're on our toes and ready to work hand in hand with you because these are such compelling opportunities for improving transit in our region. And we're looking forward to working with you and working with the community to be part of and help lead those exciting conversations. Thank you. Oh, and now we have Trish Collins, our Human Resources Director.
May I ask you one question,
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Okay. The PIE, St. Pete Airport, currently, do they have like a limo service out of there, or is it all just like Uber and Lyft, or do we know?
I would presume they do. I don't know that they run it necessarily, but I would presume there is some type of current charter service.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just curious what to do with that.
I think we're getting a meeting with Blanton and myself with the PIA director to talk about
All right, cool.
how this will work, yeah.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I've got a question too. When are the proposals due for the waterborne transportation? Is the RFP already gone out?
I don't think the RFP is actually, I think it goes out on Monday. I think Al's got it planned to go out on Monday, but, and then the deadline is sometime in July.
Oh.
Come back to the PSTA board in August with the award.
Okay,
is the
so like a
time.
30-day response, that kind of thing?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
The Cross Bay Ferry is currently under contract with Hillsborough County, that goes between Tampa and St. Pete, and it has another year on its existing contract, so sometime probably in the fall, we would work on issuing an RFP for that to replace the existing provider of that service. Sometime next spring, probably.
Okay.
Quick question, if I may. When is the community bus plan due to be, because you made this statement that it's done every 10 years? When is the next revision date? When is that 10-year?
We're going to bring it back to the board in October. Some other deadlines that would apply would be getting it to Forward Pinellas so that it's part of the transit development plan that's also being put together.
Right, so when is the 10th year, is my question.
It's usually
Oh.
every 5 years because the MPO, Fort Pinellas, has to do their long-range plan update every 5 years.
Okay, so it's every 5, not 10.
Yeah.
So when is?
Sorry, I misspoke.
Okay, so when is the 5th year?
Well, we're in the 5th year now.
We're in the, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
So, and Ford Pinellas is gonna vote on their, long-range plan in like October or this fall. So that's why we have to get the community bus plan done, or at least the recommendations done to feed into that this year.
Now, okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chair.
yeah.
All right, well, good morning, everyone. I'm Trish Collins, the Director of Human Resources, and I'm going to talk with you about the part of the fiscal year 25 budget that relates to personnel, specifically salaries and health insurance and fringe benefits. Now, that does make up a pretty significant portion of the fiscal year 25 budget, about 60%, and that's consistent with prior years. Talking about salaries first, the bulk of our salaries is paid to our frontline employees. That's those employees that are represented by our largest bargaining unit. That's the group made up of bus operators, fleet and facilities maintenance personnel, and our customer service representatives. We are currently kicking off negotiations with that group for a new 3-year contract. Those negotiations are being led by our Chief Operating Officer, James Bradford, and we do hope that we'll bring back a contract for you to review and hopefully approve in August of this year. So that's currently underway right now. So that's salaries for our bargaining unit personnel. It's the biggest group. We have, for this budget, assumed a 3% merit adjustment for administrative employees, and that's based on performance reviews that are conducted at the end of the fiscal year. Now, we're very mindful about the balance between our administrative expenses and our operations expenses. And so we have built into this budget ideas to reduce 3 administrative positions. The first way is by looking at outsourcing the fair revenue counting function that's currently a part of our finance department. We've had some retirements in that area, and through some creative restructuring and looking at outsourcing, we believe that we'll be able to reduce 2 positions in that area. We also, through looking at restructuring in our marketing department, have been able to reduce our marketing staff by 1 position, again, through restructuring based on vacancies. The other significant portion of our personnel expenses are health insurance. This year, we have seen an increase in our claims, and if you recall, we had a 0% increase last year. So between those 2 factors, we did expect that we would have an increase in our health insurance rates for this upcoming year. Now, we've worked very hard with our insurance broker to negotiate down the initial increase, which was proposed at 13.5%. That increase has been negotiated down now to a max of 7%. This is consistent with other Florida agencies that are looking at generally around a 7 to 9%. So that's actually pretty good compared to other peers. In addition to the 7% plan option, which keeps all components of our insurance plan the same, we are also looking at a 5% increase option. Now, that does come with drastic increases to the deductibles and out-of-pocket and prescription drug costs that our employees would bear when they use services. So there's a trade-off for having a lower premium increase. We are discussing both options with our union and presenting them the options, and those discussions are currently underway. But to be conservative, we have built in the 7% option to our balanced budget. Either way, either plan that we end up using, the cost increase will be shared between employees and PSTA, with a goal that it remains an affordable and robust and usable plan by our members. Lastly, I'll note that unlike some municipalities, PSTA's health insurance plan is not self-funded. That means we don't have a health insurance reserve able to absorb those increases. But again, we have built the expected increase into our balanced budget. With that, I will turn the presentation over to Bonnie to talk about our mobility services.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Bonnie Epstein, the Director of Mobility, and I'm going to be talking to you about our PSTA Access Service. So this is the service that PSTA is required to provide for riders with disabilities who can't ride the fixed route bus. I just want to make sure this is separate from the TD services that Debbie was talking about earlier. So first I want to go over the ridership increases that we've seen on the PSTA Access paratransit service over the past few years. So first, looking back to April of 2018, we had just over 28,000 rides in that month. And if some of you can remember, back at that time, CareRide, our contractor, was really struggling with this volume to get all the trips done. It felt like at that time, this was a huge volume of paratransit rides for us to handle. Fast forward to 6 years later, we were at just over 42,000 rides in the month of April for 2024. So I just want to really emphasize that we've seen this huge increase, nearly 50% increase in volume of trips. So we are really struggling to handle that volume. And I do want to emphasize that this increase in trips that we're seeing is really continuing to go up month to month. The rate of increase is still going up very quickly. Our budget this year for our access services was $14.6 million, and if we continue on this path of rapid growth and increased volume next year to keep up, we'll need over $16 million for these services in our budget. Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
On those numbers, I know that does this fall in the grant money that we get for the TD and so forth, or no? This is
No.
outside of our TD?
Yeah, this program is completely separate from TD. So we do have TD services in our mobility budget, but they're completely separate.
The TransDev does, so this is not TransDev.
TransDev does do both services, but we break out all of their ridership and billing. So we're not talking about the TD rides, but TransDev is a provider for TD.
So who qualifies for this program?
So riders who have a disability who can't ride the fixed route bus, they go through an eligibility, full eligibility process to become eligible for access. It's part of the ADA.
Right, but that's not part of the
No,
LCB stuff that we're doing?
It's confusing and there is overlap, but the vast majority of transportation disadvantaged customers that we serve are low income.
Right,
Are
but,
low income, and they, most of them get a bus pass. A few of them, I mean, a couple hundred, a small number of them every month get a TransDev ride to their destination. And it's mainly by virtue of them being low income.
right,
What Bonnie's talking about are people with disabilities that need a wheelchair or a individual ride, they cannot ride the bus.
but doesn't that fall, I mean, I'm on the LCB board, so I know that we have funds, we actually have leftover funds because of the veterans, us doing the Veterans Green. So maybe I'm really confused on how the LCB and all the disadvantage, and it's strictly for disadvantage, it's not low income for the
Right.
LCB,
And,
isn't this
it's-
program.
It's a whole legislative thing, but you're right that the definition of transportation disadvantaged in the statute includes people with disabilities. It does include, in addition to low income individuals, it includes people with disabilities. However, the state prohibits us from using any of the TD grant funds we receive to fund what Bonnie's talking, these rides, the paratransit service that we have to provide by virtue of the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have to keep the the sort of funding stream separate. So what we do with their TD funds is fund the bus pass program and some door-to-door trips using TransDev and Neighborly Care Network and hopefully ATP in the future.
So the program that they're designing, wouldn't that not put those people into that program? Neighborly Senior Services, Aging, Area on Aging, and all of those? Doesn't that qualify them? Because we just had a meeting and that falls into TD to this. Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, they, probably a lot of those folks that qualify for Neighborly or ATP and those do also, are, maybe have a disability also. We are obligated by the federal government to provide this service as a right that they have, as a civil right under the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have to provide this service. And then the state's transportation disadvantage funds those services there. I think the customers mostly choose whichever is the lowest cost and most convenient to them, but they have to have this. What Bonnie's talking about is really considered separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see those numbers and see where we're missing this, getting them onto that program, because we're actually gonna lose that grant money because we don't have enough people using it since we did the free veterans. So that's why I'm not understanding. We just had this meeting, so I don't understand why we wouldn't have somebody saying,
It
hey.
really kind of gets to what Debbie was talking about previously, about the reason we want to increase the monthly pass that we bill the state. Because, like you said, the state has a program of use it or lose it every June 30th. If you do not use the funds, they take the money back on June 30th. And any funds that you don't use, they lose. So there's room, we've calculated, to charge them the $85 for the TD bus pass, so we don't lose as much on June 30th. That's really where that comes into play, and it's because the veterans program, a lot of veterans were previously getting passes, now they're riding for free. That's one of the reasons why we think the 85 thing makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Bonnie, can we go back one slide where it has the right there? So when we come to the figures here for April 2024, 14 million operating expense, 600,000.
That's the total budget.
That's the what now?
The 14.6 is the total annual budget, not just April.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Total annual, which is roughly probably about 13% of all of the PSCA operating budget.
Yeah.
And it's very high. It's very high. Now breakdown, though, the PSCA access expense, 42,128 trips. That also, does that include MOD also? Okay, that's MOD and access. Okay, got it. Got it. And that would include USERV, that would include BAM, that would include all providers.
All of them.
Got it? That's all.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. So for fiscal year '25, we're looking to make some changes to that MOD program. So these changes that we're proposing would take effect on October 1st. So yesterday afternoon, I did a similar presentation for our track committee on these proposed changes. They didn't have any concerns or feedback about the proposed changes. The changes that we want to make will still meet all ADA requirements, and we do want to remain #1 with customer satisfaction. I know we've shared presentations in the past where we showed our American Bus Benchmarking Group Paratransit Customer Satisfaction Survey where PSTA was #1 with our Net Promoter Score. We really want to maintain that going forward. So we're not proposing any cuts really to either the Access or MOD program, but instead we're proposing what we're calling guide rails. And these are based on what other agencies who have similar programs as our MOD. They've replicated it. They've put these similar changes or guide rails in place to keep ridership at a sustainable rate. So first, we plan on making the MOD fare the same as the traditional access fare. So all riders would pay $4.50 per trip. Additionally, riders that take a trip on the MOD service that's more than $25 per trip, or if a rider takes a trip or 30 or more trips in a single month, those riders will pay more for those more expensive services. Again, the quality of what we provide on MOD isn't changing, and there are no changes to the traditional paratransit service, so riders can still use that without any changes. I know we can all agree that the access service is very important, a very important part of the service that we provide, and we want to maintain our #1 ranking for customer satisfaction while keeping a sustainable rate of growth and ridership on the program. And if there aren't any other questions, I'd like to pass it over to Henry to talk about our bus fleet.
Thank you. So my name's
Thank you,
Henry.
Brian.
I'm the Director of Maintenance still from this morning. We want to talk about how electric buses are paying off, but before I do, I want to take a moment to go back to the past, and certainly when the board approved the purchase of 60 brand-new all-electric buses at the end of 2021, it represented one of the largest single investment in new equipment vehicles for PSTA since 2007 era, so we certainly thank the board for that. Quick update, where are we at? We have 6 of the new buses in service, and they've been in service since January. We have another 2 that were just delivered. And we are expecting that for the start of FY25 that we're going to have 20 of these new vehicles in service for that fiscal year, and that's where a lot of these metrics are derived from. After that, throughout calendar year 25, we're going to have 24 buses being manufactured by Gillig, and we will receive those throughout the course of calendar year 25. And even after that, we still have another 24 that have yet to be produced, and those will be throughout the end of 25 into 26. So we have a lot of new vehicles coming in. When I mentioned the 6 electric buses that we've had in service in the last 3 months, they've accumulated over 100,000 miles, and we are seeing returns that are much better than expected in terms of performance. And so with that amount of data we've collected, we've been able to confidently forecast some of these savings, which I'll go through real quickly. Obviously, when you use an electric bus, you're not consuming a gallon of fuel. We're estimating that we're going to save in FY25 approximately 210,000 gallons of diesel fuel. That number is very easy to calculate. You just simply run an annual miles projection as if an electric bus didn't exist, and then that's what it is. It's about 10,500 gallons per bus. When you multiply that by finances, $2.60 a gallon budgeted, that's how you come up with the 546. Maintenance savings. I know it's common sense for someone to say, well, Henry, it's a new vehicle. Isn't any new vehicle going to cost you less than the 20-year-old vehicle you're still maintaining? And you would be correct. But there's a lot of other things that perhaps you've heard me mention about the value of electric buses or electrified accessories that you should consider that goes into this number. First of all, with an electric bus, you do not have an engine and you do not have a conventional transmission. Those 2 components alone equate to almost 10,000 moving parts that do not need to be replaced. The other thing I want to talk about is, and I've mentioned it over the years, is the value of electrified accessories. If you have a home and you maintain a yard, you may have considered going out and buying an electric lawnmower or an electric leaf blower, and you know that it's just a battery and you push a button. There isn't gas, there isn't an air filter, not a spark plug, there aren't any of those things. Well, think about on the engine of your own car where you have an or an AC compressor, you might have a power steering pump, and you see a belt, and it's gear driven. Those do not exist on electric buses. Everything is electrified, which again, fewer moving parts, more efficient, less maintenance. But here's the thing that you may not have considered. The stringent emission laws that exist when it comes to anything that's an internal combustion engine, especially with diesel. I'm going to throw out 4 acronyms. You don't need to know what they are, but they're very costly components on a commercial duty diesel engine. Diesel particulate filters, diesel oxidation catalysts, selective catalyst reduction filters, exhaust gas recirculation valves. Each of those has an average cost of about $2,000 a piece. They are something that is routinely maintained. It's the stuff that traps the particulate matter, the NOx, and it treats it so that diesel engines can comply with today's stringent emission laws. The other thing is, a lot of people don't remember that in today's diesel engines, in addition to the diesel, you need something called diesel emission fluid, the urea. It's actually not totally urea, it's only 4%. But that's an expense that we're no longer going to see. And if you're looking forward to 2027, the new and final tier of emission laws will be out, which will be to reduce CO2 emissions, which will only make all of what I just said that much more complex in terms of an after-treatment system. Not on electric buses. There's no combustion engine on an electric bus. So we're forecasting at least a 53% reduction in maintenance cost on a per mile basis with our electrics. The other thing I want to say is, okay, so Henry, you're not going to be using diesel fuel grade, but you're going to be using electricity, right? So what's your net offset? It is true. We're going to save 210,000 gallons of fuel. Our electrical bill is going to go up to about 2 million kilowatt hours. But I want to tell you right now that the cost of electricity is much cheaper than a gallon of fuel. Obviously, we have brand new state-of-the-art chargers going into, are being installed right now. We're about halfway through. Project's going very well. All of our chargers have the ability to be programmed to take advantage of different rates here in the commercial side with Duke Energy, and that's called off-peak. And if you really want to get it cheap, super off-peak, which occurs in the very early hours of the morning. So there is going to be a projected $330,000 expense for electric costs. But when you take the savings and net out the charging costs, that's why we can say that we're going to have about $552,000 savings for FY25. But it gets better. Long term, the investment of the hybrid buses over the years with the high voltage systems has prepared the maintenance staff with the experience to maintain these buses for the long term successfully. It has also trained our operators to drive them the most efficient way possible. Those are all things that can be quantified later on down the road, but they do result in savings as opposed to just starting over from scratch. Debbie?
Thank you, Henry.
I feel electrified after that presentation.
I know.
So at the beginning of the presentation, I talked about the takeaways that we had from the workshops, where we wanted to increase ridership, and you've seen from the presentations that we've got new initiatives that will increase ridership. That's coming from tourist services that you asked us to look at. All of this, along with our partnerships that we have with the granting community, with our U-Passes, et cetera, are increasing revenues. As we look at metrics, we want to focus on such things as fare recovery. Note that I didn't say fare box recovery, because you get money that goes into the fare box, but now we have a lot of partners that help pay for the actual fares. So we're going to be looking to increase that. We're not the only ones looking at metrics. The state is looking at metrics. For for not just PSTA, but all transit systems in the state. So we have reduced our administrative headcount. There's also many other areas within the budget on the administrative side that we have reduced costs. We have hit on, okay, ridership, revenues, and I do want to say, and Brad reminded me of this, next month we'll be holding public hearings on the revenue pieces of what we proposed today. So that'll be in the month of July. So ridership, revenue, partnerships, cost efficiencies, tourist services, we hit it all. One of the things I want to remind you of after a great presentation from Bonnie is that PSTA has a lot of privatized public transit services. Matter of fact, the fun fact on this slide is that we have been the leader in the country on this, and we are Uber's #1 customer in the state of Florida. Doesn't get any better than that. So one of the things I want to say, I can't leave without talking about reserves for a little skinny minute, and that is we're keeping our reserves the same at 2 months. GFOA actually says you can increase it beyond that when you live in an area, is a best practice where you get natural disasters, but we're going to maintain our reserves at the 2 months. You heard Trish talk about some municipalities in the county have health insurance reserves. That is something we do not have today. So let me just summarize the budget. 121 million, and it is balanced with a surplus. We have the potential to get more and more of that surplus as we go through the budget this summer. So we've got your homework you've got to do. We have homework on our side, and I think it can only improve from here. No service reductions. And we've got the premium service and the ferry services that we're adding in, and with the potential for other new services, such as going from the Clearwater Airport to the beaches. So that's an increased little piece of the pie that we will have. With that, I will take any questions. Yes, ma'am.
I have no questions, but I want to thank you for the presentation as well as using Skyway Marina District as your visual for this.
Yeah, we did.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We thought about you. Yeah.
Any additional questions for myself or the team? Yes?
Yeah.
Here?
So are we still, I know on the Uber, was there a requirement that they have drug testing, or was that put aside?
It's still an issue that we're dealing with at the federal government level, that there's some questions whether we can use Uber and Lyft if they're not drug tested, or they're just changing the regulations on how we can use them. But I've heard some good news lately that I'm hopeful that we'll be able to resolve that, keep it going.
All right, that's good news.
Don't they do reasonable suspicion though, or?
Not really. Not in certain cities. They have different kinds of programs, but neither Uber and Lyft or most taxis, they don't drug test. This is the way they are.
Well, BAM does for the access program.
For the access program, they do.
Okay.
Just in certain counties.
Any other questions? Thank you, Debbie.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank
You kept me away.
Do we have ridership performance?
We're gonna have that, and Trish's got a quick presentation related to the budget.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good morning again. You do have this in your packet, but I find for myself that I like to look at this on paper when we're discussing it. It is a little microscopic, and I'm reaching the age where I have to adjust where my glasses sit on my nose to read these types of things, but I think that will help us in our conversation. So again, I'm Trish Collins. I'm the Director of Human Resources here. And as you know, we use a performance counts scorecard to set and demonstrate performance on the agency's top priorities each year. And what you have before you is a draft of the proposed fiscal year 25 performance count scorecard. Last week, we brought this to the executive committee, and we also wanted to present it here today just to get it in front of more board members for review and comment before bringing it back as an action item in July. This new scorecard builds on the budget workshop that we had in April. And as Debbie mentioned, we heard really great ideas in that workshop about the priorities that the board would like us to focus on. And when we looked at all of the ideas from the discussion, the most frequently mentioned priorities focused on 4 main areas. The first was services and rider experience, which includes things like tourist-oriented services, airport connections, on-time performance, service frequency, all of those things that make up what the rider experiences when they use our services. The second priority was community partnerships and relationships, which includes things like our CPAS, UPass, and new ideas for revenue generation. Third was marketing and communication. We heard from many of you a real desire to change public opinion and help more people in the public understand that there are great times to ride PSTA for more reasons than they might currently be doing. And lastly, finances, of course, making the agency resilient to budget fluctuations. So as we looked ahead to produce this scorecard for next year, we kept those 4 main priorities in mind: services and rider experience, community partnership and relationships, marketing and communication, and finances. So I'll just go through from top to bottom the new metrics that we're proposing for this year. And in the top section, beginning with healthy communities and workforce, we have 6 metrics that really focus on the board's priorities for rider experience. We have customer satisfaction surveys for all 3 of our modes: fixed route, paratransit, and our new ferry service. So we're proposing to set goals and conduct rider surveys and report our performance. How are we doing from the rider's perspective? This section also has 2 key employee metrics. One is an employee engagement and satisfaction survey, and the other is a measure of our annual voluntary turnover or departures, so those folks who choose to leave PSTA. So those are 2 key metrics that show how we're performing inside the agency, maintaining a stable and skilled workforce. I will note that there are 4 surveys in this section for our riders and our employees, and we'll bring the results and a presentation for each survey to the board. So you'll get a full report on the results of those surveys. The second section, resiliency, expands on what we had previously called environmental sustainability. And this section includes 3 metrics. The first, which is a measure of our environmental impact. The second is a new metric to report the resiliency and condition of our assets, things like our buses and our facilities, using a scale that is used by the federal government to measure asset condition. And the third metric is fuel reduction, which is a measure of the resiliency of our fleet and directly tied to the electric bus deployment that Henry was just talking about. Obviously, this has an impact on our bottom line from a financial perspective as well. And then lastly, a large section has to do with economic vitality, and this measures the responsible and effective use of our financial resources, revenues, and capital projects. Just going through this section, we have a metric to measure our budget adherence, making sure we're not going over budget. We have a metric to measure ridership growth, and that will capture ridership on all of our modes. We have a metric for Clearwater Transit Center. This is on our current scorecard, and we will update it with the key project milestones for next year. We have a new metric we're proposing to measure the return on investment from the Sunrunner that would look at the changing, growing development value in the corridor. Next, we propose maintaining our current operating cost per revenue hour metric as a measure of our efficiency and the good use of our resources. And lastly, a new metric, again, that Debbie mentioned in the budget presentation, to measure a growth in our fare and fare equivalent revenue. So this is a measure of fare box recovery, but also CPAS, UPass growth, and new revenue generating ideas that we will work to implement. So we believe that this updated scorecard meets or includes the priorities that we heard from the board in many meetings, including the recent workshop. And I will turn it over at this point back to the chair for any comments, questions, or discussion about how we can ensure that this meets your vision for what the agency should be delivering and focusing on for next year.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments? Looks good. I'll be looking forward to seeing how that all turns out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we have ridership performance with Devon.
Good morning, Chair Albritton, Planning Committee. My name is Devin Deal, Planning and Data Analyst Manager, and I'm here to go over some of the operating performance highlights from April this year. So I want to start with our fixed route ridership. This is all of the routes that PSTA operates, plus Jolly Trolley and Looper. For the first time since our service reductions in December, we have surpassed fiscal year 23 ridership. We had about 20,000 more fixed route rides in April this year than we did last year. That is primarily due to the really large increases we saw in our Jolly Trolley services and our Suncoast Beach Trolley ridership. So we're very excited about that. Now I'm going to highlight some of our main transit and transfer center locations outside of spring break. So first of all, the number that you see in the bar graph is the number of routes that serve each of these transfer locations. And our number 1 and number 2 are no surprise. That is Grand Central in St. Petersburg, that is just east of 34th Street, and then Park Street Terminal in downtown Clearwater. And that's the facility that we are replacing with a new Clearwater Transit Center in the coming years. One thing I do want to point out on here, though, is that you see a lot of malls that stand out as our top transit and transfer center locations. And we know that patterns have changed and the malls aren't really the shopping destinations anymore. But malls are generally located on our major corridors that are already served by transit in central locations and have spaces where buses can generally pull over and provide good opportunities for transfer. So while the mall might not be the destination anymore, they're still really useful locations for transit, and I think this highlights that. And so during spring break, you see a new addition to our top 10, Clearwater Beach Transit Center. Outside of spring break, this sits around number 11, just off this chart, with around 420 rides per day. During spring break, that over doubles and jumps up to nearly 950 rides per day. And again, most of that is attributed to the really large increase we see in ridership on the Jolly Trolley and the Suncoast Beach Trolleys, thanks to our interlocal agreement that we have with the City of Clearwater to provide that additional service. Yeah, and so that really big, over 100% jump during spring break at the Clearwater Beach Transit Center, and that is separate from Park Street. That's over near the marina by the traffic circle on Clearwater Beach. And so just to highlight a little further that increase at the Clearwater Beach Transit Center, this graph on the left shows you the ridership during the non-spring break period and the average daily ridership during spring break. We see that really, really large jump to nearly 1,000 daily rides. And then, as I said, that really large increase in ridership was primarily driven by our Jolly Trolley and Suncoast Beach Trolley services. You can see Jolly Trolley North Beach almost tripled in ridership. Jolly Trolley Coastal, which runs from Park Street up to Tarpon Springs, or the Clearwater Beach Transit Center up to Tarpon Springs, over doubled in ridership. Jolly Trolley South Beach almost tripled, and the Suncoast Beach Trolley over doubled from roughly 40,000 rides to over 80,000 rides a month during spring break. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes.
What are the dates that you're considering spring break?
Spring break is the months of March and April.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Clearwater, for supporting a good spring
Yeah.
break. It helps the
Looks like
ridership.
Very popular there.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Great, thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, other businesses, anybody have any other business to bring before the committee? Okay, our next meeting is July the 24th at 10:30 a.m. And this meeting is adjourned.
Nice job, Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
When's your next
trip?
I don't know. Well,
To get together so long.
yeah, it'd be fun.
I talked
No,
to
she was funny. She was in Athens last night. She was coaching one of the other friends.